Okay. Recording has started. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the September Division of Adult Education monthly webinar. This session is being recorded. By participating in this session, you are consenting to the recording, retention, and use of this session. No other recording of this session is allowed. Oops. So very quickly, before we get started with the presentations, I want to say happy National Adult Education and Family Literacy Week to everyone. I know some people are not able to join us today because they are in Harrisburg meeting with their representatives. They've taken couple programs have taken students to meet with their representatives. But I want to say thank you to all of you in the field, to you, your staff, your volunteers, your larger organizations, for all of your hard work and dedication to the adults and the families you serve. And thank you to your students for their hard work and commitment to their own education. So next slide. So today's agenda is pretty full, so I'm just going to quickly say first we'll be starting with some folks from West Ed talking about the adult numeracy in the digital era study that we're participating in with them. Then Laura Frederici from PDE will talk about the pathways to graduation, and then Cheryl and I will be doing some division updates and reminders. Hello, you'll need to mute yourself when you join, please. Carolyn, first slide is Carolyn Espinosa, and is it Rhea Sharma from West Ed, and they will be giving us a course overview and a study overview. And let me stop sharing. So do you have the share option?
I believe I do.
Okay, I will stop sharing then.
Okay, let me make sure I'm sharing the correct one. Can you see my screen?
I can, yes.
Perfect. Okay, good morning. Thank you for having us. I'm Carolyn Espinosa from West Ed. I am the project manager for the ANDE study. I'm also joined by my colleague, Rhea Sharma, who is one of our site liaisons. So as a brief introduction, West Ed is a research, development, and service agency in the education space. And we were awarded a grant by the Department of Education to develop an adult numeracy and digital literacy course, as well as corresponding professional development. So today, what we're going to be doing is just a brief introduction of our team, an introduction to the ANDE course, as well as an overview of our pilot study. We do only have a brief amount of time today, so I do just want to start at the beginning by saying if you have questions, if you are interested, I will be dropping an interest form as well as our consent form into the chat after this presentation. And so please reach out if you have any questions or want to learn more about the study. So we will put those in the chat right after this. So starting with our team, these are our 3 site liaisons who will really be the face of our study. Anyone who decides to participate will be interacting with these 3 people. We have Catherine Schwinden, who is actually a former ABE instructor, Rhea Sharma, who's here today, as well as Jessica Taylor. A brief introduction to the ANDE course, as well as the project. As I mentioned, we have been developing and testing an adult numeracy and digital literacy course, which you can see happening in phase 1. We also did a usability study, which some of you may have participated in. Afterwards, we did a round of revision. We did another feasibility study with another group of teachers, as well as continued on with improving the course. What's come out of those piece is the ANDE course in professional development. A brief overview of what it is. The math course is made for students at EFL level 4 or CCR levels C and D. The curriculum is contextualized and relevant to adult learners. And we've also developed some other supports, such as an online course platform, digital literacy components built into the course, as well as some circle supports, which is our SEL components, as well as some ELL supports as well. The design principles for the course are these 4 here. It's active and collaborative. It's flexible and goal-oriented, relevant to adult learners specifically, and is really focused on relationships. You can see the brief descriptions here. Again, for time, I'm going to be going relatively quickly, but I'm happy to send out these slides after this meeting as well. On this slide, we have a few quotes from instructors and students about the different design principles of the course. I'll give you all a second to look at some of those. All right, so that is a brief overview of kind of what's come out of these first few phases, and what's happening where we are right now is we're coming out of phase 2 and preparing for the pilot study. We're completing one last round of course revisions, and what's coming out of this are additional language supports for students in the course. We're creating signature routines to help with reading for math comprehension and things along those lines. We are revamping our professional development, including we've hired a faculty mentor, Lauren Thatcher, who some of you may know, to support instructors. And we've also revamped our circle components of the course, which used to be known as productive persistence, and it supports for social, cultural, and emotional aspects of learning. What's also come out of our latest rounds of revisions is a change to the course structure. So we are now have created, instead of one long course, 4 mini courses. What we've seen in the field, and as well as what we've seen in the research, is that having shorter periods of learning where students can see their progress, as well as reach their goals, tends to be more effective. So we have created 4 mini courses for the study. We are focusing on mini course A and B, which you can see down at the bottom. However, all instructors will have access to all 4 and can use all 4. We just ask that you teach specifically A and B. In the mini courses, the first lesson always has time to build community and set goals, and the last lesson always has time to reflect and celebrate what the students have accomplished. On the side, you can see the number of lessons for each course as well. They are shorter. Oops, all right, go back. So overall, the ANDE lesson structure is we have 30 minutes of pre-work, which introduces concepts to the students. We encourage teachers to actually do this in class with their students. It's then followed by 60 minutes of a facilitated collaborative learning with the students, where they really grapple with and work with the new concept. And then it's followed by 15 minutes of post-work activities to solidify their learning. And that portion, we do say, can be done independently by the students. So that is a very brief introduction to the ANDE course in professional development. We are happy to provide more materials as well as some sample curriculum to anyone that is interested. We will also be hosting additional informational sessions where we will be diving deeper into the course and professional development and what they look like. So I encourage everyone to sign up if you are interested. A brief overview of our study. As I mentioned previously, we are aiming to study the impact of the ANDE course and corresponding professional development on learners
Sorry, Carolyn, you're going to have to unmute yourself again, I think. I bumped the mute button for you.
Oh, sorry. Where did
No, that
I?
was my fault. Sorry about that.
No problem at all. Where did I leave off?
I think just at the beginning of the timeline and eligibility, I think you might need to start this slide over. Sorry about that.
Nope, no problem at all. Happy to. So the study actually begins this January and will run through December 2025. However, currently we're only recruiting for spring 2025. However, anyone that participates will be invited to participate in the fall as well. We are recruiting teachers that teach math. So you can have a single subject math course, or you could be teaching a multiple subject class, but be teaching a math component. Either is fine. We ask that you have students EFL levels 3 and 4. However, we realize that courses may have students at a level 2 or higher, which is fine as well, as long as you have some students at those levels. And we ask that the course section not be identified as ESL. So our study model, anyone who decides to participate will be grouped into 2 cohorts this fall. Cohort 1 will be participating in our 2-day launch workshop in January and teaching the ANDE course in the spring, as well as completing some research activities like surveys or completing some logs that we have. Again, all of those teachers will be invited to participate in the fall if they would like. Cohort 2 will be teaching their course business as usual this spring, and if they choose to continue on in the fall as well. However, we will ask you to teach complete some of those research activities, such as the surveys, the teacher surveys and logs. After the study, starting in spring 2026, cohort 2 will have access to the ANDE course as well as the corresponding professional development materials for a full year. If you decide to participate, what we will ask is that you will participate in the 2-day launch workshop in January, participate in 5 virtual coaching calls, and teach the ANDE course. Those 3 are specifically for cohort 1, who will be teaching this spring. But both groups will be asked to distribute study materials to their students, so help them complete consent forms, have the students complete a survey or a test, things like that. We will ask the teachers to complete 4 instructor logs, which again should only be about 10 minutes of time. We will ask you to complete 2 surveys, which will be slightly longer, about 20-25 minutes, and 1 brief digital literacy activity. As a thank you for participating in the study, we are stipending instructors. So it is prorated based on the activities that you complete. You can see here the list, the ask that we have on the left, as well as the stipend on the right for cohort 1 or cohort 2. The only difference between the cohort is that cohort 1 is completing some activities that cohort 2 doesn't need to complete. All right, so benefits of participating in the study. We are providing free pre-planned lessons with corresponding comprehensive instructor guides. So everything's ready to go for the instructors. There's professional development aligned directly with the course materials, as well as these instructors will be contributing to research in the field, which is desperately needed. It's also an opportunity to network with other instructors that are enrolled in the study. As I mentioned, we have coaching calls where we'll be convening instructors across agencies. So for time, I'm not going to show this video, but one of the teachers we've worked with shared what's been helpful with the professional development supports that we do have. Again, I will email out these slides and I encourage you to watch the video. Oh, sorry, let me go to the next slide. So we'll wrap it up here. If you are interested in joining the study, I encourage you to complete the consent form, which I will put in the chat. Or if you have more questions, you want to see sample curriculum, you want to ask us more about what being in the study entails, Please feel free to complete the interest form that I will drop, or just email us at the email below, and we're happy to schedule one-on-one with you or answer your questions via email. Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. And one thing I wanted to add to that is that for the individuals who are participating in the study, who are doing the professional development, that does count as the professional development for the year that we have, that we require. So, okay. I'm going to quickly share my screen again and go to the next slide, and then I'll stop sharing again. So our next presentation is Laura Frederici. Laura, and I'm not sure, is it Frederici or Frederici? From the career, who is a career readiness advisor here in the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education at PDE, and she is going to be talking about the 5 pathways to graduation. And
Hi,
I will stop sharing. Hi.
Hi, you were correct the first time. Frederici, although I get it all types of ways. So thanks for the opportunity today to share a little bit about the Act 158 pathways. Feel free to put in the chat what your primary questions are so I can best serve where your needs are. And from my understanding, you want a bit of an overview because of population that you work with and students needing to graduate. So I'm going to pull up my presentation. Okay, are we good to go, Amanda?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, so I'm going to go over for you what the pathways are, and you should have received a graphic. So if you do have that, you might want to have that handy as we go through this, and what programs can help support young adult learners for graduation, and resources for those opportunities. So what is Act 158? So in 2018, Act 158 expanded the options to graduate, so the students are not just graduating from high school based on academic keystone exams, which was the norm for many, many, many years. It's beyond that one assessment. So we're going to look into other ways to ensure student success in graduation. And it did begin with the class of 2023. So this is the graphic, and we'll refer to this again, but I just wanted to give you a visual to begin with, because as we go into the verbiage, it can be a little bit confusing. So what you want to primarily look at in the dark blue are the keystone pathways first, which all students have to take nearly all students have to take the keystone proficiency unless they've been exempt for special education or other reasons. So that's the standard in the 3 buckets of algebra, biology, and literature. And there are scores associated with that. The next pathway, so we hit a percentage, and for the most part, hopefully it's a large percentage. And as you go through, the next one is the Keystone Composite, where you're looking at numeric scores, and we'll dive into those numbers a little bit. And third are the pathways that are probably most aligned to this audience, and that would be CTE concentrator, alternative assessment, and evidence-based pathways, primarily evidence-based, because this is where you have more options. And of course, there are waivers within the graduation pathways, and students with individual IEPs, individual education plans that they graduate on their goals. So we're going to go into these and what they mean. So the keystone, the proficiency versus composite versus additional pathways. So as you saw on the graphic, if you're proficient or advanced in all keystone, then you are good to graduate. The next level is the Keystone Composite Score, where you take at least one score proficient or advanced and no score below basic, and as long as that score is greater than or equal to 4452, and you also graduate with locally required education graduation requirements. So keep that in mind with your local requirements. And then if that's not working for you, then those other pathways with proficiency on local grade-based requirements plus one of these other pathways. So this might be too much information for you, but I'm going to share it anyway because it's possible a student may not be in the program for whatever reason, and they already scored proficient or advanced. So if they did, they may not need to go any further to graduate in terms of the Keystone. So this is the score. The schools have those. They know what those scores are, and they keep track of that. So we know what students were proficient or advanced or not. So that is your minimum scaled score, 1500. Let's say you missed there, as in the graphic that I shared earlier. You have a satisfactory composite score in Algebra 1, Literature, and Biology, and at least a proficient score on one of the three, and no less than a basic score of the remaining two. Again, you would not need to know this. The school would have that information and a composite score there. So depending on where that student is, they may have taken the Keystones and been in that top category and no concerns are needed. Or they are in this category and they just need to bump it up with combining those scores. So that provides more opportunities for success. Now, if you had a student that needed to graduate, they were out of the school for a while and they're going back in, because from my understanding is we're really looking at students that need to be on the pathway. It is possible that they were enrolled in career and technical education. And the only students that can graduate on the CTE pathway are those students that are concentrators. So I can't just be a student and take a course at the CTE or be partially involved and graduate on this pathway. So first, you must, in all of the last three pathways, have successful completion of locally established grade-based requirements for each of those Keystone exam content areas in which the student was less than proficient. So you're going to see that for each of these last three pathways, and one of the following. So basically, you are in a concentrator program of study. So let's say the student was in that, and that generally means you completed 50%. That's just kind of a rough concept. It can vary a little bit by the amount of hours and so on, and how they count them, depending on where they are in their CTE pathway and the likelihood of success. So that is based on the teacher, director, the student is in their certification program studies. They feel that they have a good success and they feel that they have met the requirements to be a concentrator, which is about half of the program. If you're not in CTE, you just ignore this. So already at this point, the first two Keystone pathways did not, you're not in that category, nor are you in this one. So now you have two more options. Alternative assessment pathway, same requirements of locally established grade-based requirements for each Keystone, as I said earlier, and then just one of these. So, I don't have to read them through, but these are other possible tests a student may have taken, the SAT, the ACT, the ASVAB. So all of those could have been done by the student, and we have scores associated on the next slide. A concurrent enrollment course, a completion of a pre-apprenticeship program. By chance they're involved in pre-apprenticeship at their school, if there is one, then if they completed that, they could graduate on this. Just one of these pieces of evidence. So these are the scores that are needed. And I won't read through this, you can kind of look at them. And again, this starts to get in the weed a little bit, so I think primarily I can answer questions, scenarios of students that might be helpful that of and where they might fit a little bit later. So this is really the pathway that's probably best suited for someone who has been in and out of school, and they want to be on that path to graduation. So again, the completion of locally established grade requirements and the appropriate score, and 3 pieces of evidence. So if you have that chart in front of you where we're looking at, you can have 3. There's a top section and a bottom section. You can have 2 or 1 of these, or 3 of one, or a combination of all 3. And if you have that at the top, you don't have to do any more. So if you had 3 industry recognized credentials, you would be good to go. How might that look in reality? You are a student and you are working at a nursing home, and you've taken some type of OSHA course there. Maybe you've taken a CPR certification, or ServSafe, or something recognized by the field in order to work there. If you've done that, you can use those as pieces of evidence. Let's say you have 1 of those. We're going to look at a situation where we're going to pull from the bottom. You have a CPR certification. You're working at a nursing home or somewhere else, a grocery store or a restaurant, and maybe you have a ServSafe industry certification, and you can do the other 2 from the bottom. You're working in that business, and they guarantee that you're going to have full-time employment. It does not have to be for more than 1 hour after graduation, but at the time, they're going to guarantee that they could offer full-time employment, so you could get a letter. The student could also do a service learning project of some capacity, or an internship, or a co-op education program. The projects generally are considered suitable. There's more guidance on that, which I won't dive into, but usually, a learning plan, some type of student or adult advisor, and, approximately minimum about 10 hours usually qualifies for those experiences. So, you have someone who's working, they have an industry recognized credential, and maybe they're going to do 2 of these. If you don't, you must have 1 from that top category. So these are the scores. And again, you probably wouldn't have that access as much as the school would, and they will let you know if a student isn't graduating, or they'll let that student know. So coming back again to this graphic, so I went through the slides. We talked about Keystone proficiency. So if the student took the Keystone and scored proficient or advanced, they're set on that pathway already, regardless of where they are, what they're doing, if they're in or out of school. Keystone Composite pulls from above and then looks at some of those scores to do a composite score. If that isn't applicable, then if they're a CT student and have just left, they could still graduate on that pathway if they are a concentrator. And then the other pathways, as I shared, alternative assessment. It's a little bit more finicky because I think there's some unique testing in there. And evidence-based gives you options, especially for students that might be employed. I wouldn't worry about the waivers at this point. A district would be able to determine whether a student would be qualified for a waiver, because that's a pretty broad category, and an IEP. The student's special education teacher would be on board with that. So again, just to help with this visual, this is another visual that has those same pieces pulling down those last 3 pathways. And remember, in this last one, you need 1 or more from the top. If you have 3, you don't need any of those extras. Any questions so far about that? I have just a few more slides. I can take a question. I was going to dive a little bit into what an industry recognized credential was.
It looks like we have one person with their hand up. Go ahead, Chrissy.
So this might be something we can't answer today.
Okay.
If we have English language learners who did not participate in K-12 schooling in the United States, they're here working through our integrated education and training programs, obtaining a credential. Could they then get a Pennsylvania high school diploma because they did the industry credential, even though they had no other U.S. education?
I wouldn't say necessarily. Again, it's local control, but if the student enrolled, do I understand they are enrolled in a district in some capacity?
They would be enrolled in our adult education program.
And are they still do not, so they are adults then? They aren't like under 18.
Correct.
In this capacity, that would be, and Amanda, I would say that would not, because I'm thinking GED for this, so they'd have to be enrolled in a school district because we're only looking at students that are graduating from high school.
Yeah, this is, Laura, my understanding from this is, this is for individuals who are enrolled in secondary education. So, and these are ways other than just passing the Keystone exams to earn the high school diploma. So for everyone on the call, the reason I asked Laura to join us is, we've heard frustration from you that you have kids, people under the age of 18 who have said that they've dropped out of school, but they really aren't allowed to drop out of school because they're under 18 and they're still in compulsory school age, and they don't want to go back to school, but you're not allowed to serve them because they're required to be enrolled in secondary education under state law. So we're not expecting you, or I'm not expecting you to be the person to provide this information to the student. This is so that you understand the options that the school districts should be making available to these students, so that you, in encouraging them to re-engage with their local school district, that you have some background knowledge of the types of services that the school district should be making available to them. I certainly don't expect you to be the expert on this and to be trying to guide them through the process, but this allows you to understand what should be made available to them so that when they hopefully go back to the school district, they have some knowledge in their communications with the school.
Thanks for clarifying that too, Amanda, because if there is, if a student thinks there are no options, which I guarantee that the students are not aware of all of these options, and you are the adult working closely with that student, they do have options, especially with that evidence-based pathway. And not necessarily a student that's dropped out, maybe just a student that had to take medical leave or they're off from school and they really don't have enough of a connection with the school. That evidence-based pathway is really an ideal pathway for some of those kids. And I don't take for granted that someone has, is off for whatever reason and they pass the Keystone. So I think it is important to know that students can graduate on multiple pathways, and there's more opportunities to graduate instead of just, I didn't pass the Keystones, I'm dropping out, So, but in regard to industry recognized credentials for anyone, young adults, older adults, myself, industry recognized credentials are very valued with employers. So just wanted to talk a little bit about that because with the question I just had, that in itself is, a good piece of evidence, or an employer would look at that depending on what field they're going into, that may even be required, especially for, working in service industry and some of the healthcare industry. So that's just wanted to share a little bit about that. So in CT programs, in their programs of study, they add industry recognized credentials because many of the pathways they're in would require CPR or welding or whatever the case may be. But we also allow students that are not in CT programs to identify and report industry recognized credentials as long as they're aligned to their career pathway or academic program or a future career path. So it's basically in the explanation of industry recognized credential is in the title. It's portable. It can go from agency to or employer to employer rather. So if you are taking CPR through the American Red Cross, we trust you, not only an employer. If I had a heart attack, I would want someone who was certified in CPR to take care of me. So that's a good visual to think of. And it's similar for any other area. You know, if you're working in an office and computers and you want someone that really knows what they're doing, they're going to have different certifications that industry recognizes with that. So it demonstrates that you have the skill that industry says you can do this. There's a set of performance standards and specific tasks. Certification that's quite common would be the Microsoft Office, the mouse certification. Which is a certification that I happen to have because I was a business teacher, and so I know a lot about Microsoft, and I'm capable of working with it in ways that other folks might not be able to do so. So, like I said earlier, you know, CT, they do this all along. This is more from the teacher end, that if you're going to count it for a student that's not in career and technical education, we really just want it to be, you know, in their interest area or academic studies in the career cluster or workforce demand.
Laura, I'm sorry, there was one question. Is this information shared with high school guidance counselors across the state? Do they receive training on these options?
Absolutely. So Act 158 has been presented statewide on multiple sessions to anyone in any school who wants to go. So I've been on those calls and we dive into the pathway. So that piece of course, that's been done the last 2 years already. My team, Career Ready PA, which is myself and leads from the IUs in 10 regions in the state, present to schools. And they can even present, you know, if you have folks in adult ed, they can present about career and workforce readiness opportunities and related information about industry recognized credentials and anything that has to do with career readiness. This happens to be my PDE landing page. So if you just Google Career Ready PA, you'll be like, it'll be the first hit likely. So we have like a newsletter in there. We have different guidance documents. There's connections to a coalition resource, to workforce, to career ready skills. There's a lot on this page. So I encourage you to explore. I have the resources. I can share this presentation, but there's a lot of information here. I don't know if anybody's going to be interested in diving into the toolkit, but these links are there. We have a toolkit on our educator resource page, which we refer to as SAS, which has to do with standards aligned content. And so it dives into these pathways. So just to show you that there is a toolkit for this, and it gets into it a little bit more. We have a work-based learning toolkit on this same site. If you went to pdesas.org, and it's also in the resources at the end, anyone can register and be part of this community. And again, this is what that looks like. It gets into the types of work-based learning. And I'm getting in here, like, what is service learning? These are some of the work-based learning activities that we dive into, and you're probably well aware of them: job shadowing, internships, and so on. So like community-based work programs, students with IEPs are often like those full-time jobs that they have working in community-based instruction. We have a career readiness community on SAS. This is obviously an old photo, but this is kept up to date. If you request, I can bring part of the community. So we constantly have activities and events for kids, adults to go to, teachers that have to do with career and workforce readiness. And we have resources at a coalition page. This page is currently being updated, so it might not look quite like this today if you Googled it. Excuse me. And so in these resources, in each of the regions that are clickable, you would find, for instance, employers that might have tours. You might find a big STEM event. You might have any type of activity that you as a parent, teacher, educator, student could. And so this is the Career Ready PA website, the toolkit, the coalition, and the community. So that would be about all that I have. So
thank you so much. I guess, Laura, if you could share the slide deck with me and I can send it out to everyone so they have all of those, that would be great.
Sure, absolutely. And
thank you.
Any questions? I'm glad that I could be of assistance. Please feel free to reach out at any time. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Laura. You have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, and I'm going to try and go through so I hope that was useful. It really was, just so you understand what's available to the students. That is not a way that's still only for people who are formally in high school. So that would only be individuals up through 21, and that it's not like an alternative to earning the high school equivalency credential. This is just ways that kids who are in school can earn their high school diploma other than just passing the Keystone exams. Okay, I'm going to zoom through a couple of my slides to make sure that Cheryl has enough time for hers. Yay, we have a new advisor. It's Hope Edis. She joined us a little under 2 weeks ago. These are the agencies that she will begin working with over the next 4 to 6 weeks. I know several of you have already met her on the phone calls that you've had with Cheryl or Mary this month, and the rest of you will be meeting her moving forward. So I did ask her to be prepared to turn on her camera and wave at everyone. So I don't know, I can't see everything. So Hope, if you can turn on your camera and wave. Maybe you've already done that. I am going to go on. There she is. So welcome, Hope. We're very glad to have you. Okay. There we go. Very quickly. The grant updates. The advisors have completed their review of the grants. They are with me. I have completed review of the tutoring grants and the family literacy grants. Some of the tutoring and family literacy grants have moved along the approval process. Others have been returned to you. So please go into eGrants to double check to see if your grant has been returned for corrections. I have done about half of the adult education, and I still have about half of those left to review, and I have one Section 243 grant left to review. I will say in reviewing the adult basic education grants, I have prioritized the smaller community-based organizations. So I'm now getting into those of you who are intermediate units, post-secondary institutions, and school districts. I did want to say that just because the division has approved your grants, so the grant has gone through the division chief review and eData accepted steps. So once it's past the eData accepted step, you can, the next Monday, you can start entering data related to that grant. So once we've completed the eData accepted step, that gives you access to eData for that grant. But it doesn't mean you're going to get paid quickly. There are now 2 other offices in PDE that review the grants, and then those grants go on to the controller's office, and sometimes they can sit with the controller's office for a while. I do plan to email the controller's office next week to request that they process any adult, division grants that are with them, so that hopefully they'll get October payments. But I can't guarantee anything. I can send them emails. They may respond, they may not. For those very few grants that actually got funds in September, you will need to submit the FAI quarterly reports, also called reconciliation of cash on hand reports. But it is only for grants that got funds in September. So if you did not get any money on your grant in September, you don't have to worry about the FAI quarterly report. In these reports, you are reporting to Controller's Office how much you received versus how much you have expended. And then the FAI system calculates how much you will have when you receive your October payment. There's a formula that the system uses to determine if, after receiving October payment, you have what they determine to be excess cash on hand. If so, your November payment will be suspended. So that's just kind of explaining that process. Division quarterly reports, which Cheryl will provide a little bit more information on when I'm done with this slide. They are expenditure reports, and you submit those to your advisor, even if you have not yet received any funds for that grant, because you're letting us know how you have spent funds to support the grant-funded program, even if you've had to use local funds to cover the costs while waiting for the grant funds to flow. So you're just saying this is what it's cost us to provide services July through September. Reminder, your agency policies for 24-25 are due to your advisor by October 1st. These are the student attendance policy, assessment policy, intake and orientation policy, and the data collection, entry, and reporting policy. The policies do have to also include procedures. We recommend that you use the policies checklist that I emailed to our program contacts earlier this month to ensure that your policies are complete. Then earlier this week, I sent an email with links to the 23-24 corrections education and Title II in the PA Career Link and Workforce Development System surveys. I attached Word documents to the email so that you know what the questions are and you can prepare the answers before you actually have to go into SurveyMonkey. But we do need you to complete them in SurveyMonkey. Do not mail in the Word documents, please. As a reminder, all agencies, including subgrantees, must complete both surveys for the for the corrections education survey. If you did not provide corrections education, you just answer the first 3 questions and submit it. That allows us to know that everyone has in fact responded and that I'm not missing information that I need for the narrative report. So I will now turn the webinar over to Cheryl to go over the division quarterly reports. Cheryl, I am stopping sharing so you can share yours.
Am I sharing?
Yes.
The QAR. Greetings, everyone. This is a quick recap of the quarterly expense reports for the division. We are not addressing the quarterly FAI reports, which are in a parallel universe. We are addressing the QERs, which are submitted to your advisor at the division here. There are a few new administrators who may not be familiar with the QERs, and a few others of you program administrators who do not actually get a chance to review the QERs because the fiscal department in your overarching entity may be sending the QERs directly to us without letting you see. But that's not what we intended. So a review for you too. Those of you who are familiar with the QERs and how to work with them can take a little nap during this review, and I'll wake you when we get to the new stuff. The QERs are Excel spreadsheets that mirror the format of the FER, the final expense reports in eGrants. Some of you have elaborate accounting systems, but we in the division can only see data reported with eGrants. So the format, the language of eGrants is the common language for you and for us. And so this is what we see from the FER budget summary in the eGrants. You can see that the function codes are the headings listed here for all the rows, and the object codes are listed across the top for all of the columns. And therefore, that is what we use for the Excel QER. Again, you can see the function codes and the object codes are listed in the same way. And there is a tab for each of the quarters, as well as one for the cumulative, which has an ongoing total. So here's the QER. So what? What are you looking for? As program administrators, you're looking for compliance of the guidelines, of course. Each quarter, you're checking to see how you're doing on the floors and the ceilings required in the guidelines. The floors must spend at least, the ceilings cannot exceed. And you're looking for common sense expenditures. What do you mean we've spent 90% of our budget in the first quarter? Or what do you mean there are no in-house professional development hours at all and it's already the third quarter? Now you can look at anything you want, of course, but those are examples of what we at the division might review. So this is not a document only for the fiscal staff and us at the division to see. It is intended to be reviewed by you program administrators in a language, a format that is common to you and the division. So how and where do you get this magical QER? Amanda will be sending you the forms, I believe later today. Forms? Why is that plural? Because there is a separate QER Excel spreadsheet for each type of grant. So you will need to complete one for each of the grants that you have. And there are instructions as well. Take a look at the first instruction. Submit the quarterly reports by the 10th business day of these months. It so happens this year that they fall on the 15th each time. The instructions continue. On the budget revision worksheet tab, enter approved grant budget as soon as the grant has been approved. More about that later. We're asking that each time you submit to your advisors, please save it with your agency name, the program year 2024-25, and the particular quarter, such as Q1. We have a lot of agencies. We have a lot of quarterly reports. And so this naming convention helps us to find them. And so now we're going to move to the new feature on the budget revision tab. So wakey, you old pros, here's the new stuff. And it deals with this thing called the budget revision worksheet tab. And we have new stuff. It's new and improved. Here, wait for it. the autofill cumulative expenditures. So what? This is a tab on each of the QERs. It's the budget revision worksheet. If your expenditures differ by more than 10% from your original budget, let me repeat, if your overall expenditures differ from your original budget by more than 10%, you must have a budget revision submitted and approved before you submit the FERs on eGrants. Some of you did not do that, so we wanted to make sure it's more obvious to you if and when a budget revision might be required. You saw on the instructions, it said, enter these budget amounts as soon as you get your budget. Then these will be calculated in the projected expenses will be entered automatically from the calculations in your cumulative tab. So you will always be able to see how you're doing. Is a budget going to be required to have a revision? Oh, and look right here. Here is a budget revision form for you so that you can line item describe how the money is being moved from to. And it says a real explanation or justification. That means why? What happened? It does not mean, well, we didn't spend the money or we spent too much money. That's not an explanation. That's not a justification. So we need real stuff. Let's go live now with a real example. This again happens to be the FER for the, the QER for the federal 064. And you can see, as the instructions told me, I diligently and dutifully filled in all of my budget amounts. Oh, but look, I didn't fill in the total grant amount here. Where do you think I could find that? How about here at the totals? So that the object codes equal 9,000 and the function codes equal 9,000. That must mean my grant was for 9,000. And now we can see that this sucker is 24% over what was originally budgeted. And the magic little arrow takes me over here and says, I must do a budget revision. So that concludes our brief tour of the QERs. Amanda, back to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Cheryl. Let's see, I have to share my screen again. Okay, I know that we're over. The last slide, unless people have questions, is specific to the post-secondary enrollment forms because we had gotten some questions. If you're not someone who worries about the post-secondary enrollment form, you're welcome to leave, or if you, obviously you're always welcome to leave, but I'll go through this quite quickly, hope to be done within the next couple minutes. So the post-secondary adult enrollment verification forms, you can send those in throughout the year. You don't have to wait until the end of the year. Just when you have them, send them in. we got some questions about like what they're good for, when they should send them in, if it's worth sending them in. I would say just send them in. Our statistician is kind of the one who decides if it's something we can use or not. But I did want to let you know that for EFL gain, so in order to be a way that the students can show EFL gain, the student does have to transition to post-secondary education during the program year that they were enrolled in your program. So for example, last year, somebody who was enrolled in the 23-24 program year, for entry into post-secondary education to count as an EFL gain, the student had to have entered post-secondary ed by June 30th. They can, as of June, the feds, Octave changed and said the student can, it used to be that they had to exit adult education and then enroll. Now they can just enroll in post-secondary education. They could still be enrolled in adult education. They're doing them concurrently. That's okay, but it does have to be before the end of the program year. However, for the purposes of the National Reporting System secondary credential attainment, which is what we have to report as a state to the feds, earning the secondary credential, the high school equivalency credential, is only considered a success for the student if they are also enrolled in post-secondary education or employed in the year after exit. So if you had someone who was enrolled in your program, passed the GED test and earned their high school equivalency in April, and they enroll in post-secondary education in September of this year, while it does not count as an EFL gain, it is something that we need in order to be able to report their high school equivalency attainment as a success for the feds. So, even if the person transitioned after the end of the program year, if it was within a year of them exiting your program, we still use it for something to support our reporting. So it's still important for us to get it if you can get it. And then for agency performance, we do look at transition to post-secondary education after exiting the program. And that can also be after the end of the program year. We just kind of have to get it before we do our calculations, which is usually towards the end of the calendar year or the beginning of the next. So, I guess long story short, if you can get a post-secondary verification form with the signatures and all of the information, please submit them. Better safe than sorry, but we had a couple questions and I wanted to clarify that. So, if anyone has additional questions, we can stay on. Otherwise, we are done for the day. Thank you all very much and have a lovely day. If you do have questions, you're welcome to unmute or type them in the chat.